Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar this afternoon here in Brussels, my sunny Brussels over here where I am, around being intentional for gender equality. I'm really excited to get this conversation going with two staunch gender equality advocates, who I'll introduce in a moment, after talking about why we're gathered here today and giving a short introduction to the topic that we will be discussing. International Women's Day, March 8th, was last week. Typically, we see that March is a time for action and attention around gender equality. Businesses host events to celebrate women in the community. Individuals will challenge each other to create pledges and commit to actions that move progress towards gender equality. It's an inspiring time, we find in March. But if we want to create lasting change and really push for the progress we want to see in the long term around addressing and combating gender inequality, March 8th has to be just the beginning. According to the Gender Equality Index used by the European Institute for Gender Equality, and a new one was released today, the EU scored 68.6 points out of a possible 100 in 2022. The most equality was seen in access to healthcare, while power was the most unequal area. Money had a score of 82.6 points out of a possible 100. This may not sound like a big gap, just 17 out of a bit points, but let's put this into context. In the EU, the average female employee works for free after 10th of November, which is known as Equal Pay Day. Because she is paid less than her male counterparts, she is more vulnerable to factors like inflation and has less purchasing power in the face of the cost of living crisis and other recessions. She will also likely receive a lower pension upon retirement. So we can see that these 18 points may not sound like a big difference, but they have a considerable knock-on impact, and we really must make progress in this and other areas of gender inequality. So joining me today to discuss how we can be intentional about addressing the inequality within society and making progress towards equality are gender equality advocates Dr. Audrey Floor-Ngomsik and Robert Baker. Dr. Audrey Floor is a corporate social responsibility... Hello. Dr. Audrey Floor is a corporate social responsibility strategist and CEO of Trianon Scientific Communication. She helps C-suite executives ingrain sustainability into their business strategy and make their operations greener to boost profitability and competitiveness. Audrey Floor sits on a number of boards, including being the president of the Brussels Binder, a nonprofit that works to improve gender diversity in policy debates. And Robert Baker, Robert's focus is helping individuals and organizations realize the full potential of their talent through leadership development, coaching, and team building. In 2020, he set up Potentia Talent Consulting, and today advises companies on their approach to the D&I market. Robert is a vocal and outspoken gender equality advocate whose work in this area includes serving as diversity and inclusion strategist for the nonprofit European Women on Boards. So a very big welcome to you, Audrey Floor and Robert. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, delighted to be with you.
To get the discussion going, I'd like to bring in Audrey Floor first and ask a question. Because as I mentioned, then the Commission's report just came out today talking about gender equality in the EU. And one of the main conclusions from this report was that gender equality must be integrated at all stages of the policy cycle. And this is something that the Brussels Binder does. It is the reason for existing, in a sense. It is what it does, how it actually creates change and moves the needle towards gender equality. And while you've been president of the Brussels Binder, then you've been instrumental to establishing intersectionality as a key part of the long-term strategy. So it'll be great to hear from you more about the work that Binder does and your involvement there, and why you believe that intersectionality is so important for making progress.
Okay, hi. So thank you very much for this question. So the Brussels Binder is an organization that is fighting to have more diversity of voices in policy debate. So for the people who don't know what they are, you just have to see that when you have a law that is voted, okay, you have the subject of the law is brought by the private sector and the public sector, okay, and you have the two independently that goes, and the problem is seen to be voted. The thing is that till recently, not that long ago, the only problem that were coming up was problem brought by white men. And so if you want that the problem of everybody, that the people who are elected are working for all the population in Europe, you need that everybody is represented. Okay? So being able to do, we want that men and women are represented, which is very good. But also what you have to not forget is that in Europe, you have a diversity of men and a diversity of women. The Brussels Binder has decided to focus on women. And we actually think that if you talk with, and if you give voice to the women that nobody talks about, you make everybody grows. Okay? And that is very important. So intersectionality is to see that some women, because they are women, they are discriminated, of course, but they will be also discriminated because of where they're coming from, because of their perceived, because of their age, because they have a disability, because they have a different religion than the majority, because they have a different sexual orientation than the majority, because they have I don't know, a different brain function. You know, they have a neurodiversity that is different, and all of that. We don't know if they are discriminated because they are women or because they have this difference from what we call the normality. And in Europe, being between brackets, between quote, normal means being white, cis, middle class in Brussels from the Brussels bubble. Okay? So if you differ from that, you are perceived as different as foreigners. Okay? So how do we make sure that all those people that very often are not that foreigner because they're born in Europe, they've been there for at least 2 or 3 generations, but they're perceived as different. Okay? How are we sure that people who do not fit the norm have their voice also represented? And today this is not the case, and this is why the Brussels Binder is actually integrating intersectionality as one of the basic pillar of the value of the binder.
No, thank you very much, Audrey Floor. Great to hear more about the work, the very valuable work that is being done by the Brussels Binder. And yes, the importance of bringing in intersectionality and understanding that to help really make progress in the right way. Robert, if I can bring you in here, I'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing with European Women on Boards and your work as a gender and inclusion strategist there, because of course this also ties into the need to have more women's voices, or at least gender equality, as the report was saying, at all stages of the policy process.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also need women's voices at all levels in organizations, both, kind of foundations, private companies and public companies. And so that's something I'm very passionate about. And as you know, I've been on my journey in gender equality for quite a long time and very passionate about gender balance. And I was trying to think recently, kind of what is it that drives me so much in to do this work? And I think some of it's around the kind of things that Gloria Steinem talks about, which is basically what she says is that once men realize that gender roles are a prison for them too, they become really valuable allies to women because they're not just helping somebody else, they're actually freeing themselves. And I think this kind of explained why I've been so passionate about this and got so involved in all the different areas, because I believe I've got a privilege and I've got a duty to use it. So that's led me to be on the board of EWOB as the D&I strategist. And there obviously we're looking to get 40% of women in boards and executive positions, but I'm also on other women's networks to kind of amplify the voice of women. So I'm on the board of One Loud Voice for Women. Of course, I'm a partner with Brussels Binder, so very delighted to be working with Dr. Audrey Floor on that. And I think it's really critical that we male allies, step up and do as much as we can. So what do? I mentor and sponsor women where I can. I've got a number I'm working at the moment. I'm actually also mentored by a woman as well, which is really interesting, or actually there's a couple of women there. I invest in female-run businesses. There's 2 that I'm investing at the moment, in Peak and Talup, which are run by female CEOs. And then I run a lot of workshops for men on why they should engage with all of this, why they should engage in gender equity, and how they can overcome the bias and the stereotypes themselves to become more effective allies.
Great, thank you, Robert. And I'd love for us now to dig into this topic about male allies and talk more about this. I think it'll be of great interest to our audience checking in, just for more tips as well, how to engage more people to really make progress around gender equality. So I'd love to ask both of you this about how you can really use your privilege and your influence to be an ally towards seeing more gender equality? And I feel, Robert, the question that I had in mind was really asking how you use your privilege and influence to do this. I feel that you have partially answered this question in the examples that you just mentioned, but is there anything else you'd like to add? And of course, tips to other people, how they can tap into their own sphere of influence to be effective allies?
Well, I think it is to look around and see, where can we make a difference? And of course, it's not just at work, it's everywhere. It's home as well. And, I think there's a number of good thinkers on gender equality that say gender equality starts at home. So actually there's something about men showing up and, taking away the double bind that so many women face and taking a share of the mental load. So I think that's a very important way that we can show up as allies. But then there's the whole range of things that we can do if we work in organizations, such as, for example, mentoring and sponsoring women. As leaders, for example, we can demand data on, so what's the representation of women in our organization? Because you talked about the pay gap, but one of the reasons there's a pay gap is because women aren't enough at the top in organizations. They're in the lower paying roles, if you know what I mean. So we get more women represented equally throughout the company and at the top of the company. That's going to close or help close the gender pay gap. So those are sort of things that men can do as well. But I think very simple things every day, like, for example, if you hear or see bias, then you call it out, basically, and you feel confident to do that. And I think basically you try and get other men engaged in this as well. So I, spend a lot of my time thinking about sort of how to do that. But for me, it all started really, to be honest with you, and what I'd advise other allies to do is to start by challenging your own assumptions and your own privilege, your own bias, your own stereotypes that you have. I remember taking the Harvard implicit test, the implicit association test for gender and work and home, and was shocked to find that I'm still biased towards men having careers and women being in the home. And it's like, my God, how could that happen? Because I spent all these years working on gender equality. But we get all these messages at us all the time. We're socialized, we grow up in cultures that where we're given those messages. So I think that's kind of partly to explain it. But yeah, so there's lots of things that men can do. I spend a lot of my time talking to men who say, what can I do? I say, well, here we are. There's a whole list of things you can do. But start really firstly by understanding more about your own privilege, your own situation, and then seeing how you can listen to the voice of women and understand what their lived experience is, and then see how you can support them in your workplace and at home.
Mm-hmm. Self-reflection is so important, for sure. As you're saying, be aware of your own assumptions, your own biases, and use that as a starting point for understanding better how you can be influential.
Yeah.
And Audrey Floor, what about you? What are your thoughts on this topic about how to be an effective male ally?
Yeah, so as Robert was saying, I do agree about self-reflection and also having more to the dimension of diversity where decisions are taken, meaning gender, also intersectionality, let's say, okay? But I think also, as you were saying, data, having accurate data in companies is super important. But I would say when we talk about discussion and making people realize what they are, it's also realizing that for men and women, for white and non-white, for people able or people disabled, the perception of fairness in a workplace is not the same.
Yeah.
And so from that, already all the questionnaire that we do are not well conceived. Often when we go to company and we say, the data gathered are not accurate, and so we don't know what problem we want to fix. So the first affirmation already is not correct. So if we okay to say, depending on who we are, the conception of fairness is different. Okay, if we're okay to say the problem is not how I see myself, but how people see me, the way we get, you see, because if we look at me, for example, in a company, they will ask me, so what are you? Are you black, white, European, whatsoever? Okay, and I have to tick black because it's how people see me, right? But me, my background on paper, if you don't see me, you would say I'm white. Do you understand? So it's really the perception thing that has to be made more widely understood, and it's with the self-reflection that Robert was talking about. And of course, I'm a scientist. For me, data is really important. because you cannot fix what you don't know is broken.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned, Audrey Floor, about really making sure you understand the problem you're trying to fix as well. So data comes into that, making sure you really understand what it is. I think that that's very key to being intentional about moving the needle in terms of gender equality. I'm wondering if both of you have more words to share about what it means to you to be intentional about making this change.
Well, for me, it means taking action, basically. I think in the workplace and at home. And one of the things that I've been developing is a kind of matrix of action, if you like, whether you're just leading in to gender equality, or whether you're an ally, or whether you're what I call an agent of change, which is basically kind of a leader really leading, making a difference, actively driving change. So I think it's really important to set out that there are actions that people can take in each of these groups, as it were, and the actions that we were talking about earlier are the actions that I think that we really need people to take. So, for example, we talked about challenging their assumptions and listening to the voice of women, and sponsoring and mentoring women, and debiasing recruitment. I think that's a really important one, to ask people to be intentional about debiasing recruitment, promotions, succession planning, because it's amazing how much bias there still is in those systems that mean that we don't get a full range of diverse talent coming through into the workplace. So I think kind of those are some of the things that I would certainly be saying that company executives should be doing. But I think we should all be intentional about just looking around us at the home. Who's taking care of the kids, who's taking care of the elder folk, who's getting the stuff done in the house, how are we sharing that? Because increasingly these days, we have couples where they're both have jobs, both have responsible jobs and careers. So we've got to have more, that sharing going on as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, for me, it's more pragmatic about it. In companies, is to show them how much money they lose because they're not doing it, because that is directly on their profit. Okay, to trigger the change. Also, quota. It's not that I like quota, but I like what they do. And if we want to move faster, they are going to be necessary. And the other thing is that I think people need to really understand the difference between gender equality and gender equity to have things change. So if I may, when we talk about gender equality, is to have the same right and the same opportunity, right? A woman should have the same pay. She should have the same opportunity, be able to go to the same position than a man without having microaggressions or, things that stop her because she's a woman. But when we talk about equity, is to understand in the company or in the society what has happened so that today a woman cannot be a CEO easily, or a woman has its difference, and trying to correct all the historical wrongs that came to that. So it's really thinking, okay, as you were saying at the beginning, Robert, today at executive of companies, there's basically no women, no people from diverse background. So how do we fix that? And how intentionally in every sector, every department of the company, we make sure that in the next 5 years, people are going to be promoted, are going to be mentored, are going to be sponsored to be able to be at those positions. That's that for me.
Well, I'd like at this point actually to bring in a question from the audience. Up on screen, we have a question from Daniela to Robert about what's going on at EWOB, European Women on Boards, and wondering if intersectionality will be reported on as part of their annual gender index reports from now on.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. That's a great question. So one of the things that I've been brought into European Women on Boards to do is to help them build a more diverse approach to everything that they're doing. And we've set up already a working group within EWOB to look at how we diversify more the talent pool that we're building, the membership of the organization, the people that go through the programs that we run, because I think European Women on Board should be all women on board, for all women, basically across all the intersections. And when I first got involved with European Women on Boards, I could see that there's still, based on its history, really, there's still a lot of Western European, over-representation, if you like, and less representation, if you like, from people that either are outside Western Europe or actually who live in Western Europe but come from diverse backgrounds. So for me, it was absolutely essential if I was going to play a part in European Women on Boards that we took an intersectional approach. We took and we tried to make sure that EWOB was available to and reaching out to all women, basically. And actually, interestingly, of course, they want to bring in men as well, because we want to have a fully diverse approach to this. So actually, I'm very proud to say that at the moment, going to be 3 men on the board of EWOB. So we're getting the male voice in as well, and we're working together alongside our women board member colleagues, as it were. So that's all good. So I think what you can see is that everything we're going to do from now on is going to reflect intersectionality. So we'll take a look at the gender index report as well as all the different things we're doing, because I think anyone looking at European Women on Boards now has to see an organization which is representing all women and creates opportunities for all women. So that's really our focus going forward.
That's great to hear, and thank you for answering that question, Robert. Something coming to mind for me is that collaboration is so important with working towards our common goals. And it's great to hear about how EWOB and Brussels Binders, for instance, have collaborations. And I know that Audrey Floor, you're also involved in EWOB, independently of your work with the Brussels Binder. It's great to have this cross-fertilization of ideas, to have collaboration. In my view, we need more of this, because as I'm sure you and people joining us virtually will know, the latest figures from the UN are that it will take about 300 years at the current rate of change to actually reach gender parity across the world. So clearly there are things we must be doing better. The things that we are doing now that we probably should stop, things that we need to start doing. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts, perhaps starting with you, Audrey Floor, what are your thoughts about where we're going wrong, perhaps, and where we could do better?
First thing is really for me, we in Europe, we do not count because we don't like uncomfortable conversations. Simple. Okay? And so it is very important to be able to put numbers and to say, this is the way it is in Europe. There is 15% of people who have a diverse background. There is 25% of people who have a disability. Are they represented everywhere? They're not. Okay? And the disparity is not 1%. It's zero. Okay? The disparity is huge, in fact. But the problem is that because we have this that says we're all the same, we don't see the color, or we have different nationality, European nationality, so we are diverse. We don't want to trigger the uncomfortable conversation. But I have to say now in corporation more and more, they're open to that. With me, I show the money side, okay, but I'm okay, because the point today is not, it's okay if people don't believe in it or do it because it's the law or do it because it will give them a good image. Today, they just need to do it. And then in 10 years, in 20 years, we'll see the effect. You see, so whatever is the trigger, for me, I have no problem with it. But there's not so many people who have started the journey in that. They're still stalling, a lot of stalling, in fact. That's the big problem. It's like sustainability in general. There's not 10% of the people or the organization or the company in Europe who have started to do something. It's way less than this.
Yeah. I mean, if I might add, I think the problem is in the current economic climate, there's also a danger we're going backwards as well. Because when we looked at, for example, the tech companies and who they were letting go, by far the bulk of the people they were letting go were women, for example. So it's kind of like, my gosh, we're going backwards. And I think what we know, unfortunately, I mean, you mentioned 300 years. I mean, I don't know, the World Economic Forum talks about, I think, 125 years. I mean, it's a long time anyway, basically. And what we know is that change happens slowly. Because what we're talking about is societal constructs, so basically how are children raised? What are boys raised to believe? What are girls raised to believe? Are they raised to believe they can have careers in STEM, like Dr. Audrey Floor, for example, that they can really make a major difference in all the important things in the world. So I think that it starts there, and then it's into the education system, and then it's into companies, and companies have got a big responsibility to do more, I think, to drive more representation of women throughout the organization across the intersectionality spectrum as well. And of course, that means doing things around flexible working. It means doing things around parental leave. It means doing things around dealing with the cost of childcare. And we've just had a budget in the UK where they've been trying to address the cost of childcare because it's prohibitive and prohibits women, really being able to pursue the careers that they want to pursue. We've also had, dare I say it, leadership criteria that have very much favored men, because it's always favored those kind of alpha male type characteristics. And women entrepreneurs have always struggled to get investment. I mean, it's completely disproportionate how hard it is for women entrepreneurs to get investment in their businesses. So those are the things that have really been sort of structurally, if you like, wrong, and do take some time to change. But we can actually, start to speed it up, particularly with men and male leaders getting involved and stepping up as allies. What we know is that I think 96% of companies that involve men report progress on gender equality, whereas the companies that don't involve men, only 30% report progress. So men getting involved can make a big difference. And I think companies having targets for how they want to balance their executive committees and boards is important, because those business targets are just like any other business target. They can be aimed at, they can be rewarded, and progress can be measured. And I think what we've also got to do is think about how we get to future leaders. So one of the things I do is I work in a number of business schools like edX, ISCG, for example, in Paris, to help train up future leaders, basically, to think about these issues. So when they go into companies, they'll already be thinking, how can we make it a more equitable environment, as well as, of course, how can we make it more sustainable, and all those other things that they need to be thinking about. And I'm really trying to work now hard with private equity companies to ask them to speed up change as well, because I think private equity companies can also play a big role here.
I think that's a great point you make about making sure that people have the tools to make sure this is part of their decision-making processes. It's part of their awareness as well as they go forward. These are the future leaders that we're training to be able to help us tackle these issues. And I want to pass the floor over to Audrey Floor, because this is something we were talking about just before we went live with the program that you're running at the moment to do just this.
Yes, exactly. So I do think that to be able to go forward, people need to be trained. Okay, but at the same time, I also think that quota will be necessary everywhere. But to be able to have people get in and are trained, you need, as you were saying, Robert, that the leaders, the executive of tomorrow, of today even, have the skills to understand the link between gender diversity and sustainability and environmental sustainability today, because lots of data show that when you are more diverse in the decision of a company, this decision line, you have a company way more sustainable environmentally and more profitable.
Yeah.
So voilà, so we are doing a training for us, Trianon Scientific Communication, with 4 modules to give to the new leaders, new executive, new directors of a company who don't have the background, the 4 modules, so that they get this link between people, planet, and profit. And so that when they are in the position, in board position, executive or directors, at least they know what question to ask for, what to look for, what is going to be impactful in their strategy when they want to incorporate. And gender diversity is a sustainability issue. It's a social sustainability issue.
Yes, it really is, definitely. And I'm going to flash up another comment that we have from Daniela. Thank you very much, Daniela, for getting us started with great questions and views. Talking about, yes, the need to educate people in venture capital as well, the leaders there. Saying I work with companies in this industry, still too biased. Yeah, so great. We're all points in our alignment here. We all agree that there's progress to be made, and we have some great pointers here about how we can make that.
Exactly. But having good men allied also is very important. Thank you, Robert.
No, it's great, Audrey. Listen, thank you. I think it's a privilege to be an ally, and my job now is to inspire other men to become allies. And one of the things that I did last year, which was really useful for me, was I did some research on the benefits to men that are already showing up in diversity and inclusion, and said, okay, so what are you seeing? Because I want to have that evidence to show other men that aren't yet involved. And it was really interesting. 97% of the 100 men that we surveyed, the male leaders, said they were a better leader as a result of engaging with gender balance and diversity and inclusion. They felt they're also a better human being as well. That was interesting. 80% of them said it was better for their business. So I think, my advice to men is kind of like, look, just be prepared to get a bit out of your comfort zone and step into an area that maybe you're less familiar with. But kind of make a start on it, and you'll get to reap these benefits. I mean, I joined the board of a women's network 15, 20 years ago, And it was deeply uncomfortable for me at the time, but it was the most amazing development experience that I've ever had. So I now say to men, go and join a women's network, get involved with the Brussels binder or whatever it is, because I think you'll learn by working alongside women that actually, we can achieve so much more together, and you'll learn from them some of the skills that are important for leadership today.
That is great. Some really powerful results to share there. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to both of you for really making this a very invigorating conversation. Unfortunately, the 30 minutes always goes quickly. We are out of time now, but thank you so much for joining, and for everyone joining virtually as well, for thinking questions, contributing thoughts. Keep the conversation going. Feel free on LinkedIn, on YouTube to still submit your thoughts, and we'll get back to you if you have questions as well. And flashing a link up here on screen now for my business, Kazuri Consulting. If you enjoy events like this and insights about inclusion, subscribe to the newsletter. Once a month, I'll send you information about events that we're running and other companies as well, to really help broaden your perspective and awareness, and learn and grow together about how we can be more inclusive. So just to sign off today, thank you very much to Robert and Audrey Floor for joining us. And
thank you.
Let's all commit to making progress and reduce the 300 years. That would be nice.
Exactly.
Yes,
thanks a lot, everyone.
We'll commit to that.
Okay. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.